Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving into the world of JSP and understanding its life cycle.
Ma'am, I keep hearing about the JSP. What exactly is it?
JSP is a server-side technology used for dynamic web page generation.
What is dynamic web page generation?
Dynamic web page generation includes dynamic page request processing, where the server generates content in response to user interactions or requests.
I think I understand what it is now. But what exactly is dynamic page request processing?
In dynamic page request processing, the client sends an HTTP request. The web server receives it and checks if it's a static file. If found, it serves it directly. Otherwise, it forwards the request to the web container. The web container runs the server-side code like JSP or Servlets. If needed, it queries the database to fetch or store data. Finally, the response is generated and sent back to the client.
Ma'am, I get that JSP and Servlets both handle requests. But what makes JSP more efficient?
Great question. JSP is simpler and more efficient. It lets you combine HTML and Java code in one file, reducing the complexity of servlets. Also, JSP pages can be accessed directly without needing any mapping in WebXML, unlike servlets.
So JSP doesn't require extra configuration?
Absolutely. Now that you understood how JSP requests work, let's dive into JSP Lifecycle. The JSP Lifecycle consists of 7 key phases. Each phase plays a role in handling requests and generating responses. First, the client sends a request to the web server, which checks if it's a static file. If not, it forwards the request to the web container. This is before the JSP lifecycle begins. Now the JSP engine, Jasper, translates the JSP file into an equivalent Java servlet class. This is the translation phase. The servlet is then compiled into a .class file so the JVM can execute it. This is the compilation phase. Once compiled, the .class file is loaded into memory, and the web container creates an object of the servlet. This is the loading and instantiation phase. Now the container calls the JSP init method to initialize the JSP. This happens only once. This is the initialization phase. For every request, the _JSP service method is executed to handle client requests and generate dynamic content. This is the request processing phase. Finally, when a change is detected in the JSP file or the application is shutting down, the web container destroys the existing servlet instance by invoking the JSP destroy method. This ensures resources are freed before recompiling or unloading the JSP. This is the destruction phase of the JSP lifecycle. But since JSP destroy is called, the entire lifecycle starts again, beginning from the translation phase.
Wow! So every JSP page goes through these phases inside the web container. Does that mean whenever a user requests a JSP page, it gets translated, compiled, and processed every time?
Good question. Not exactly. Some phases, like translation and compilation, happen only once unless the JSP file is modified. However, for every request, the service method is executed to handle it. Let's break it down further. For the first request, the JSP engine Jasper translates the JSP into a servlet class. Then the container loads, instantiates, and initializes it by invoking the JSP init method. The web container processes the request by spawning threads, with each request handled by a separate thread invoking the JSP service method and sending the response. For subsequent requests, the servlet container checks for changes in the JSP. If no changes, the request is handled by a new thread invoking the already instantiated servlet service method. If there are changes, the entire lifecycle restarts from the translation phase. The container destroys the existing object of the servlet by invoking the JSP destroy method before creating a new one. Before we dive into the implementation of the Java lifecycle through code, Let's first take a look at the directory structure of a JSP-based web application. Here's a visual representation of how the files and folders are typically organized. Since JSP is a server-side technology, we need a server to execute it. Here, our Tomcat server is already configured. Now let's explore the JSP Lifecycle. A JSP file contains both HTML and Java code, including two key lifecycle methods, JSP init and JSP destroy. When we run on server by sending the first request by typing lifecycle-demo.jsp in the browser, the JSP file is translated into a .java file and then compiled into a .class file. It is loaded, instantiated, and then JSPinit and JSP service methods are invoked. For subsequent requests, only JSP service is executed, as the JSP is already compiled and loaded. But what happens if we modify the JSP file? The entire lifecycle restarts. But before that, the web container detects the change, destroys the existing servlet instance by calling JSP destroy, and then recompiles and reloads the JSP. And where is JSP service in the code? Well, you won't find it explicitly written. Why? Because the JSP engine automatically generates JSP service when converting JSP to a servlet. You cannot manually override JSP service, as the servlet container manages it internally. All JSP scriptlet code is placed inside JSP service by default.
Oh, I see. So the JSP file is first translated into a servlet, and that servlet handles requests using _JSP service. That makes sense now.
Exactly. You got it, Raji.
Thank you, ma'am. This explanation really helped me understand how the JSP lifecycle works behind the scenes.
You're welcome, Raj. Keep experimenting with JSP and you'll master it in no time.